party at Lilith's place. It was the kind of party everyone talked about for weeks. Lilith's annual Halloween bash, the biggest house on the block, the loudest music, the strongest drinks. This year, Amari and her friends were finally invited. They had been hyped about it for days. Amari lived in a predominantly black neighborhood that bordered a wealthier, predominantly white one. Lilith's mansion sat on the wealthier side, looming like something out of a gothic novel. It was the kind of house that whispered when you walked by it, a place that felt older than the city itself. But Lilith had always been friendly enough, showing up at the neighborhood events with her flashy outfits and charming smile. Amari and her friends, Malik, Shanelle, and Dee, showed up late, as usual, thinking they'd make a grand entrance. The music boomed inside the house, spilling out through the open doors. As they stepped inside, they were immediately greeted by flashing lights, the smell of expensive perfume, and a sea of people in elaborate costumes. But something felt off. Amari couldn't put her finger on it at first, but as they moved deeper into the house, the feeling grew. It wasn't just the eerie decor, cobwebs, dark candles, old mirrors. It was the way people were looking at them. Eyes lingered too long, as if trying to figure out what they were doing there. Some whispered behind plastic fangs and Venetian masks. "I don't know about this," Malik whispered. His eyes darted around the room, watching as a group of costumed partygoers dressed like Victorian aristocrats passed by. Their faces were too pale, their movements too smooth. "Don't trip," Amari replied, though she felt it too. They were the only black people at the party, and the air was thick with something unspoken. The house itself seemed to pulse, almost like it was alive. They reached the back of the house, where a strange table sat in the middle of the room. On it lay a large bowl filled with what looked like dark, reddish punch. Surrounding it were old photographs, black and white images of people, their faces frozen in terror. "Okay, this is weird," Shanelle said, backing up. "Just one drink," Dee suggested, trying to lighten the mood, reaching for a cup. But as soon as she dipped the ladle into the bowl, the room went silent. The music stopped. Every head in the room turned towards them. Amari's heart pounded in her chest as Lilith appeared seemingly out of nowhere. She was dressed in a long, flowing black gown, her face painted like a skull. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're just in time," Lilith said, her voice smooth like velvet, but her eyes were sharp, predatory. "We were about to start the tradition." "Tradition?" Malik asked, taking a step back. The others instinctively followed. Lilith pointed to the photographs on the table. "Everyone who enters this house becomes part of the history. You can't just show up, have a good time, and leave. That's not how it works." Amari's breath caught in her throat. She looked closer at the photographs and felt her stomach drop. These weren't just random images. The people in them, they were black. And their faces, no, their expressions, looked familiar. "They're us," Shanelle whispered, and then it clicked. Lilith's house, the annual party, the lack of black people from previous years. Amari's chest tightened as the realization hit. This wasn't just a party. It was a ritual, a feeding ground. Lilith and her friends weren't human. They fed on the essence of others, draining their life force slowly, over time. No one would notice when they started to disappear from the neighborhood. Just another missing person. Another tragedy overlooked. "Run," Amari whispered, her voice hoarse. "We need to leave. Now." But the doors were no longer doors. They were solid walls. The windows sealed shut. The walls of the house seemed to shift, closing in on them. Lilith grinned wider. "You're not going anywhere. This is where you belong now. Part of the house, part of the history." The room darkened. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, wrapping around them like tendrils. The faces in the photographs twisted, their expressions warping from fear to agony. Amari could feel it, the pull of the house, the weight of all the souls trapped here. She struggled to move, but her legs felt heavy. Her breath quickened as Lilith approached, her eyes gleaming with a malevolent hunger. And just as Lilith reached out to touch Amari's face, everything went black. The next morning, the neighborhood was quiet. No one mentioned Amari, Malik, Shanelle, or Dee. The invitation list to Lilith's next party remained the same, because some histories never stop repeating.